Thank you so much. And on that note, let us jump right into it, ladies and gentlemen, starting off with our very first session titled Building Institutions of Excellence, the Pitfalls to Avoid. I'd like to invite on stage Jagdish Kumar, Chairman, University Grants Commission. Can we give him a big, big round of applause as he takes the stage for our very first session of the day? And an equally warm welcome to our chair for this session, S. Vaidya Subramaniam, Vice Chancellor, Sastra University. A big hand, ladies and gentlemen. Over to you, sir.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to see a wonderful audience of this type for the 11th edition of ThinkEdu, and I'm extremely happy to share this stage again with the chairman of UGC. Most of you will recall last year when he was here, he shared some of the actionable agenda that he was willing to undertake just as he assumed the office of the chairman of UGC, and we saw in the Prime Minister's message some of them, the Academic Bank of Credits and many such initiatives which he immediately ensured that the fruits of the action are available to learners of different types. So that's the type of leadership that we have at UGC, that's marshalling all the resources available to make sure that this NEP 2020 is a working reality. So ladies and gentlemen, the topic that we are going to discuss this morning is building institutions of excellence, the pitfalls to avoid. Now, there are four important words in the topic itself. Building, which means we have to realize that it's not an overnight affair. So we have to really build institutions. And that brings to the second word, institutions. So it's not about individuals, it's about an ecosystem that we need to build. And thirdly, the word excellence. Sounds a little abstract, but then many people have different definitions and versions of what excellence is. So that's the third important word. And the pitfalls. So there are institutions and individuals who are extremely ambitious, over-ambitious, excessively aspirational, and want to do everything. So there are some institutions not realizing their inherent capacities and limitations, as a result of which they get trapped into these pitfalls. So let's unbundle these four important words in the immediate presence of the chairman, who brings to the stage, to this audience, a bundle of experience of being with an institution of excellence for many decades from IIT Delhi, and then running a university that is multidisciplinary. Yesterday we had the Vice Chancellor of JNU explaining about that. So as the VC of JNU, he was also responsible for a lot of such initiatives, and now at the helm of the affairs in UGC. So with this background, let me first open the discussion with the fundamental question. Sir, a lot of institutions have different versions of what excellence is, as a result of which everybody claims that they're world-class, they're excellent institution. So according to you, how do you define excellence? So that's the first question with which I would like to start this conversation.
Thank you, Vaidya. If you want to achieve excellence, either in your personal life or at an organizational level, somebody said, dream no small dreams, meaning that you have to dream big. And today, I'm privileged to sit in front of so many big dreamers here in this venue. Even if you dream big, which is the first step, you are not going to be catapulted there, and you need to focus on basics. So I'm going to touch upon some of these basics on how to build institutions of excellence. I will not talk about the pitfalls that we need to avoid. Rather, I will focus on what needs to be done if we want to build these institutions of excellence. First of all, Vaidya, we all have to be very clear on the fact that universities are social institutions. They are not corporate entities.
Yep.
And universities are the only place where young minds are trained to gather bits and pieces of this vast human knowledge so that they become knowledgeable and skillful. And universities are the only place where research is done driven by curiosity, not for any financial benefits.
That's right.
And universities are the only places where young learners and cutting edge research can coexist so that when these youngsters come out of these institutions, they can contribute to the betterment of the society.
True.
So, but how do we build institutions of excellence, and what is the meaning of excellence?
Correct.
So this is the important question that you have raised. First of all, our universities, they should transform themselves to maximize the social benefits that they are supposed to provide to the society.
Okay.
So how will they do that? Well, they need to focus on three things. One, the education that we impart on in the universities should be based on learning outcomes.
Yep.
Two, the education should be individualized. And three, it should be on a mass scale. Now, these three may appear to be contradictory to each other, but I will explain why they are required. If higher education is done on a mass scale, it will lead to an enhanced aggregate learning in society. And that will lead to enhanced aggregate productivity.
Yep.
And that will add economic value.
Yep.
And that will then increase the per capita income for each individual.
Undoubtedly.
This will then lead to an increase in per capita wealth, and that will help us in investing huge public funding for better higher education. So it's a regenerative cycle, one feeds the other.
True.
And that's the reason why I said that we need to do our education at a mass scale. Now let me look at what is an institution of excellence. Is it an institution which is in the top 100, 200, 300 of the global rankings? I certainly think that is not true. If you have seen the editorial written by the editor-in-chief of Science,
Yep.
which is one of the top science magazines in the world, just 2 weeks ago, he mentioned that all these global ranking systems, they are completely flawed systems.
So rankings is not excellence.
Ranking
Assure excellence.
doesn't really indicate excellence. In fact, many of our own outstanding institutions, IITs, are now pulling out of these world rankings. And even universities such as Harvard, Stanford, Yale University, Columbia University, University of Pennsylvania, they have openly come out and said, we want to pull out of these ranking systems. So therefore, we should not think that an institution of excellence is something which is within top 100, because there is not enough space for everybody to be in the top 100.
True.
So then, how do we define the institution of excellence, and what needs to be done to build such institutions?
And more importantly, sir, if I may interrupt, how to contextualize that for an Indian setting, given the diversity that we have to handle.
Right. So I feel that the first qualification for an institution to be called institution of excellence is that the education it imparts should be relevant to the local and national conditions.
True.
That's the first condition I feel should be satisfied. The second one, of course, is that the institution should have such a governance system which fosters freedom of thought, which gives freedom to the faculty and students to pursue knowledge in diverse areas.
Yep.
Right? And such institutions also should be partially at least be internationalized, so that there is a free flow of faculty and students among the institutions.
True.
And they should also strengthen the research and academic processes in their institutions. There is no single definition for institution of excellence because there is so much of diversity, as you said, and therefore when we actually measure the performance of a university, typically when we are ranking the universities, it is a norm-based process, meaning that you take an aggregate and compare against that aggregate and say you build a hierarchy and say you are number one, number two. But if you use criterion-based evaluation for the institutions, then we realize that each institution has its own capacity.
Correct.
And it is established to achieve certain goals, and against these goals, if you measure its performance, then you can say whether the institution is an institution of excellence or not.
Yep.
Just as we do in our houses, we don't compare one kid to the other kid and say, no, you are bad unless you become like that kid.
True.
We say that each kid has its own potential and they should excel based on that potential that they have. A similar thing that we need to do for institutions of
excellence. In fact,
excellence also.
In fact, you're inviting me to the second question. You know, in economics, you have this Gini coefficient that measures the unequal distribution of wealth. And likewise, in the higher education ecosystem, I feel there is kind of an academic Gini, which means not all institutions are endowed with all types of resources. As a result of which, as you rightly said, there are limitations based on the type of institutions they are. But you have identified various sources of excellence which can be harnessed by every institution based on their strengths that they have.
Right.
So is that framework a working reality, or is it work in process where we have spots of excellence? One institution that commits itself for rural development, another institution that is world class. So we have a variety of excellence.
Correct.
So is there a regulatory framework in the making that can facilitate this thought process to reduce this academic Gini?
So, Vaidya, while we are talking about institutions of excellence, how to build them, how to bring top-class faculty and admit talented students, build research infrastructure, and so on, there is a creature sitting on the tree and watching you. And this creature can strike you at any time.
True.
And prevent you from building the institutions of excellence. And that creature is called the regulator. Let me give you a name. Let's call it UGC. So, Vaidya, we cannot build institutions of excellence unless there is regulatory excellence.
Exactly.
Now let me elaborate on this. It's very hard to define regulatory excellence. What I believe is that a regulator should have the priorities, a regulator should be transparent, and a regulator should make the decisions based on evidence.
Yes.
Right? And regulators also should involve processes which are consultative in nature.
True.
Right? And regulators also should see that what is the impact of this regulation on the stakeholders.
Yep.
They should evaluate these impact on the stakeholders.
Yep.
And then they should see that the aggregate impact on the stakeholders, whether it is optimal.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, most regulators do not do that. And most regulators, they will regulate for the sake of regulation because law empowers them.
Correct.
I think we need to come out of that mindset. So, I was just reading in a book, a parable, and this is a 19th century parable, and it says that you should have two sleeps. On one sleep, it is written that I am just but dust and ashes put in one pocket. And on the other sheet you write, the whole world was created for me, and you put in the second pocket. Now, the secret to living well is when do you reach out to which pocket? So a regulator therefore has to strike a balance between this humility and pride.
Correct.
So in the last 1 year, for example, we have noticed within UGC that a lot of internal processes have to be improved, make these processes efficient. And believe me, only after I joined UGC, I have found that there are outstanding officers in UGC.
Yeah.
They are highly educated, committed, and they have a long experience. So we sat together and we decided that as a regulator, we need to be more responsive to our stakeholders. We need to reach out to our stakeholders.
True.
And we need to make sure that if there is enough evidence to show that an intervention is required,
Yep.
we should come up with a regulation. And we should show regulatory restraint. We should show discretion. No, these are the things that we are doing it internally.
Yep.
And you might have seen, for example, every 2 months as a regulator, me and all our top officers, we sit on an online platform.
Yep.
We live stream this program.
Yep.
And you say, ask any question to UGC.
True.
We will provide the answers.
True.
So this is how a regulator has to work. And Vaidya, another problem is, it is not just one single regulator. There are multiple regulators which are working at cross purposes.
Which should go away once HCCI.
We should go away. And that is why we are not only cleaning up our houses, but in anticipation that the Higher Education Commission of India will come,
Yep.
we can smoothly integrate into this body.
True.
So that you have one integrated regulator making the lives of the stakeholders much easier.
Yeah,
so we are working on this.
But let's just push back a little. And I have been noticing these progressive measures that UGC has been taking for the last 1 year. But from your viewpoint, what is your assessment of the institutional readiness now that you have clearly said that it's all going to converge, the regulatory agencies converging,
Right.
and then if HECI is there, what's your assessment on the institutional readiness? Because that's very important to build excellence. Only if institutions are ready to absorb what HECI has got to offer. So where do you see the readiness level of institutions, sir?
You know, when we spoke about excellence maybe 50 years ago, it was in a different context. But today, in present times, the context is different.
Yeah.
Let me tell you why. See, in 2014, globally, in all higher education institutions, there were about 200 million students. By 2030, globally, in all higher educational institutions, the number is going to double.
Yeah.
It will become about 400 millions. And a significant part of this student population will be from India.
Yeah.
Currently, it is 41 million of students, and it is going to double and triple. So therefore, in the present context, if you want to build the institutions of excellence, we need to focus on few things. I wouldn't say these are pitfalls, but these are things that
Yeah.
we need to do.
Be cautious. Be
Well,
cautious and approach in the
a
right
roadmap
Yeah.
that we need to look at. First of all, because the number of students is rising, we need to come out of this thinking of having only fewer number of students in our institutes, or selecting only a small percentage of students from across so many aspiring students and say that our admission is so competitive, therefore we are so great university. I think that is going away from our social obligations.
Yep.
Therefore, what we need to look at if we want to become institutions of excellence and build ourselves as social institutions is we need to educate our students at a mass scale.
Yeah.
And this is possible only when we introduce technology into our
True.
higher education.
True.
And towards that end, we are working, all of us, in building a national digital university. And all the universities should adopt this digital technology in their educational processes and be part of the national digital university
Yeah.
so that we can reach out
Yep.
to crores of students across the country. Point one. So our mindset should be open for massivization of our higher education. Point two, Vaidya, that we need to encourage diversity in our educational institutions.
No doubt.
You see um, that if our admission policies are in such a way that you only tap students from one particular category, then you are not diversifying the student population in the university campuses. And it's well known that when you bring in diversity, when I say diversity, it is not just disciplinary diversity, but students coming from different socio-economic backgrounds, when they live together, when they interact with each other, it will provide an opportunity for them to become better human beings.
True.
So we should promote this diversity. For example, you have seen how the introduction of CUET is providing an opportunity for students, not just those who get 99.9, but even if I get 60%, 65%, I am from a rural area, I can prove myself in CUET and join in one of the best universities.
CUET has been a big boon for these students.
Right. Just last night, the registration process has started.
Actually, it deserves applause for that. Last night, he's announced the largest testing mechanism for the country.
And I welcome all the universities to join the CUET and make use of the CUET scores to carry out the admissions in your universities. So mass scale education, diversity, these are two important things. But there is one more third important thing that we need to focus on is improving the scientific effectiveness within the universities. We need to encourage our faculty members and students to participate in conferences and make use of some of the regulations that we have already brought out. You asked, are our universities ready for many of these reforms? They are actually ready in the sense that to implement many of these reforms, they don't require any funding.
True.
All that is required is an open mind and change in our attitude. For example, when we announce the twinning joint and dual degree programs, you don't require any funds to implement this, but you can provide a great opportunity to your students to have access to high quality foreign education by sending them for a semester or two. So this is something that we need to do. The fourth one, Vaidya, and this is where I think we have failed as higher educational institutions, is providing skill education to our students. Why do you think lakhs of candidates, they apply for low skill jobs? Because they are not provided the required skills to get employment. There are so many employers, they are looking for skilled workforce, but they don't get from our educational institutions. So therefore, I request all the educational institutions to diversify your education and to introduce skill-based education also to our students. I will stop here and take some of your comments and questions from the audience.
Not a question, just last comment before I invite the members of the audience. Actually, you've touched various points. The biggest lesson is there are many sources that are available within the existing system that can prepare institutions to identify the right set of sources based on their capacity and hence build pockets of excellence, preparing themselves when the real HECA comes and throws a lot of opportunities. And of course, diversity, the massification, the scale at which we need to do is a challenge, and digital universities is also in the roadmap. There is a lot of consumption that's going to happen, but more interestingly, from a personal point of view, I feel that institutions must also contribute. They cannot just consume, they also have to shift as contributors, where you have already mentioned that it is going to be a crowdsourcing effect where all can contribute in the digital university. So it is not just the IITs or CFTIs, it's going to be an open platform. In fact, I think, in my view, correct me if I'm wrong, that this will be the largest crowdsourcing of excellence that digital universities is going to provide.
Right. So if I may add here, whatever things that I said that we need to do in order to build these institutions of excellence, it is actually preparing for the future. What happens is, in most of our educational institutions, we are bogged down by the day-to-day issues, and we don't see ahead 10 years from now, 20 years from now, where we want to stand.
True.
And whatever new things that we need to do, it appears they don't fit with our current needs. So therefore, they don't focus, we don't focus on them.
True.
So my request to all the universities, therefore, is you need to be future ready by doing things which seem uncomfortable now. When I say massivization, it is uncomfortable, right? When I say you have to introduce diversity, it is uncomfortable.
But it's unavoidable.
But it is unavoidable. And that is what is preparing ourselves for the future.
So with that message very clearly from the UGC chairman, let's open the floor for questions. Just short questions, no comments. Yes, the boy with the check shirt there. Yeah.
Sir, good morning, sir. Thank you for the enlightening speech, sir. I just have a question. While we can say that the ranking system globally may be flawed because of the parameters and the differences differences amongst the education institutions, drawing parallels, when the educational attainments and the infrastructural deficits are different amongst ourselves, amongst the states in India, how can a common education testing mechanism like a CUET or NEET be justified, and how do we intend to implement that?
This is an important question. You see, the scale at which we admit our students in our country is very high. It is mind-boggling when you compare with numbers in other countries. So how do you introduce objectivity in the admission process? How do you avoid subjectivity? I will give you one subjectivity issue. For example, if I am admitting my students in my university based on 12th standard marks, how are the answer scripts checked? A teacher checks 100, 200, 300. As a teacher myself, I know if I am checking multiple answer scripts of the subject that I have taught for years, there is bound to be variation in the way I am going to mark because of the human fatigue. So that's a kind of bias that is introduced unintentionally. Now, if a student loses admission in a university because she got 0.1% less than, no, she got only 99.7 as compared to 99.8, she is losing out the admission there. So, to avoid this kind of subjectivity, we want to make our admission process completely objective. And that's the reason why we have introduced CUET. And also, you have not asked, by introducing exams like CUET, some people say that you are promoting the coaching culture. Absolutely not. In CUET, we made sure that the syllabus is confined only to the 12th standard.
Yeah.
Students are just fresh. They have written their board exams and sitting for CUET.
Yeah.
We also sensitize the paper setters to make sure that the difficulty level is moderated.
Yeah.
And you might have seen the comments from the students who are coming out on the TV sets that they said the question paper was very good. That's the kind of feeling that you have to induce in the minds of the students. So therefore, I agree with you. There is no perfect system. There is no ideal system. We have to go for an optimal, pragmatic system.
Yeah.
And that's why we have introduced CUET.
And in addition, in 13 languages, the examination is getting administered. So you have 13 languages. So Prabhu Chola, you want a question? Yeah. Yeah, we'll take two more questions. Yeah.
It's purely a question from a journalist, not from academics, though I am a former academic, taught economics for 10 years. I'm a little baffled about your decision to open foreign university to open campuses in India. What was the philosophy behind it? Do you think the Indian university like Shastra is not good enough to compete with other universities abroad? Or you want them to come here and and demolish our own internal university system?
Not a planted question, so disclaimer.
No. Prabhuji, it is news to me that we have decided to open foreign universities in our country. We have decided to facilitate foreign universities to open their campuses here. Now, you know that every year lakhs of students are going abroad, and they go for various reasons, for the kind of experience they gain there, for the kind of employment opportunities that they have. And certainly we are not inviting the foreign universities to set up the campuses here to reduce those numbers. Those numbers will continue to grow because people are aspirational, and wherever there is good education, people will continue to go, and we are a democratic country. And our students who go abroad, there is a huge Indian diaspora across the globe. They are the pride of our country. But however, what we want to do to our students is to provide more choices. Now there are only two choices for our students. Either they can go abroad and access high quality higher education, or they can stay within India and go to the best institution and study. We are now providing another choice to the students. I want to stay in India, but I want to have access to foreign education. And this is the best way to do, to provide this kind of choice. I also said that we are looking at multiple ways of providing better choices to the students. Not just only these foreign university campuses, we have also introduced the twinning joint and dual degree programs. Already more than 50 universities are working on signing MOUs with the foreign university. So sir, the underlining principle of any reform that we are introducing in our country today is that we want to provide more flexibility to our students, more freedom and more choices. I am sure all of you are with me that we need to provide these three things to our students.
Yeah. We'll just take one last question from the gentleman, the first here. Yeah, just last question. We just have, we're almost time up, but still make it very short.
Yeah. So the question is for especially students in rural and semi-urban locations, they don't have access to good quality faculty members, and they lack the exposure to tap into the online courses and the materials available. So how do we address this challenge, sir?
Well, you touched upon something which is very close to my heart, because I come from a rural background. My mother never went to a school. My father was a teacher in a small village level school. So I know the difficulties of students who study in a rural setup. Having said that, I am also very proud of the fact that students who come from rural areas and far-flung areas, they are highly talented and they are highly aspirational. I agree with you that we don't have highly trained teachers. They don't have access to courses in emerging areas, and that's the reason why we are now introducing a lot of digital technology in higher education. It has two components. One, training our teachers. In a higher education system today, we have 15 lakh teachers. And there are two things that we need to do with respect to these teachers: changing their attitude towards pedagogy and making them digital content creators rather than just digital content consumers. Yeah. So we are coming up with a program. In the next 2 years, we plan to train these 15 lakh teachers in becoming better teachers. The other thing that we are doing is, many students may not have the financial means or the family conditions that can support them to go to a city or a town and study in a big university. And that's the reason why now we are working on this National Digital University. Take the education to the home of the student rather than forcing the student to come to a city and study.
Yep.
And of course, people say that there is a lack of opportunity for people to access this online education, but things are changing. Today, more than 800 million Indians have access to broadband internet connection. I have seen, a lady who cannot read and write using a smartphone in the villages. So the technology is becoming available. Today, electricity is available even in rural areas on an average 20 hours per day.
Yeah.
So things are changing, and we need to keep our mind open and reach out to these students.
Yeah.
And unless we empower, I was telling Prabhuji just before this meeting started, I view our entire student body as a pyramid. And on top of the pyramid, you have a small percentage of students who have all the financial means to go to Princeton, Stanford, wherever they want to go. And you have another small percentage of students, they can crack the toughest exams, entrance exams on earth, and join in the best universities. But the rest of the pyramid, that is where the large number of aspirational, talented students are there. And whatever we do, we need to do to empower this large cross-section of students, and that is the only way we can take our country forward.
On that count, big round of applause. In fact, the UGC has also very recently shared guidelines to share infrastructure facilities. So amongst institutions co-located within a radius of commutable distance, they can share the infrastructure resources. To that extent, the UGC is also allowed to avoid duplication and also improve access to infrastructure. So that's the point that you also raised. So thank you very much, sir, for patiently addressing all the questions. A big round of applause, please.